They crossed humanity's red line, and what came next was Unstoppable Part 1. Year was 2347. Humanity had spread across 47 star systems. They had built colonies on distant worlds. They had made friends with alien species. They had become traders and explorers. They believed the galaxy was big enough for everyone to live in peace. The United Earth Coalition had one rule that was more important than all others. This rule was written into every law and spoken in every language. The rule was simple. Children are sacred. No one touches human children. No one hurts them. No one takes them. This was the red line that no one was allowed to cross. Admiral Grace Harper was 62 years old. She had gray hair and tired eyes that had seen many things in 30 years of service. She stood on the bridge of her ship, the UEC Vigilant. The ship was big and powerful, but it was built for peace, not war. Grace liked it that way. She had spent her whole life hoping she would never have to fight a real war. But on this day, everything changed. Lieutenant Kevin Park walked up to her with a tablet in his shaking hands. He was a young man, only 25 years old. His face was white like paper. Grace had never seen him look so scared. "Admiral," he said. His voice was very quiet. "We received a distress signal from the Meridian colony." Grace took the tablet and read the message. She read it once. Then she read it again. Then she read it a third time because she could not believe what she was seeing. The Cathari had attacked Meridian colony. The Cathari were an alien species that looked like giant insects. They had hard shells and many legs and eyes that showed no feeling. They ruled a large empire, and they believed that other species existed only to serve them. The Cathari had raided Meridian. They had killed the guards. They had burned the buildings. And they had taken the children. All of them. 412 children between the ages of 3 and 16. They had loaded them onto ships and taken them away. Grace felt something cold grow in her chest. It was not fear. It was anger. It was a kind of anger she had not felt in a very long time. "Show me the footage," she said. Kevin pressed a button and the main screen came to life. Grace watched in silence. She saw Cathari soldiers marching through the streets of Meridian. She saw parents screaming and crying as their children were pulled from their arms. She saw little boys and girls being pushed into transport ships. Some of them were so young they did not understand what was happening. They just cried for their mothers and fathers. Then a Cathari overseer appeared on screen. He was bigger than the others, with golden markings on his shell. He spoke in broken English, his voice clicking and harsh. "Humans," he said, "your offspring now belong to the Cathari Dominion. They will work for us. They will serve us. They will learn that humans are weak and the Cathari are strong. Do not try to save them. You cannot win against us. Accept your place in the galaxy." The screen went dark. Commander Lucy Brennan stood next to Grace. Lucy was 40 years old with red hair and green eyes. She had been Grace's friend for 20 years. Right now, her hands were curled into tight fists. "They are broadcasting this to everyone," Lucy said. "Every human colony. Every ship. They want us all to see. They think this will make us afraid. They think this will make us give up." Grace said nothing for a long moment. She just stared at the dark screen. Then she spoke, and her voice was calm and cold like ice. "Get me Director Cole in Earth Command." The call connected within minutes. Director Samuel Cole appeared on screen. He was an old man with white hair and a face full of wrinkles. He had led Earth Command for 15 years. Grace had never seen him cry before. But right now, there were tears on his cheeks. "I have seen the footage," Samuel said. "The whole planet has seen it. People are in the streets. They are angry, Grace. Angrier than I have ever seen them. What are our orders?" Grace asked. Samuel was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke words that would change history. For 200 years, we have chosen peace. We put away our weapons. We turned our warships into cargo ships. We told ourselves that if we were kind, the galaxy would be kind to us. We were wrong. He leaned forward, and his eyes were hard like stone. Admiral Harper, you are authorized to use any means necessary. Find our children, bring them home, and make the Kethari understand that they have made the worst mistake in their history. Within 1 hour, every human ship in the galaxy received the same message. It was not a long message. It did not need to be. Every human who read it understood exactly what it meant. They took our children. Bring them home. Whatever it takes. On the Vigilant, Grace turned to her crew. They were all looking at her, waiting for her to speak. Some of them were young, barely out of training. Others were old veterans like herself. But they all had the same look in their eyes. They were ready. The Kethari think we are weak, Grace said. They think that because we chose peace, we cannot fight. They are about to learn how wrong they are. She walked to the center of the bridge and stood tall. I have served in this fleet for 30 years. I have always believed that war is the last answer. I still believe that. But there are some things that are worth fighting for. There are some lines that cannot be crossed. The Kethari crossed that line when they took our children. She looked at each member of her crew. We are going to get those children back. Every single one of them. And we are going to show the galaxy what happens when you hurt human children. Are you with me? The answer came from every throat on the bridge. Yes, Admiral. On Earth, people gathered in the streets. They held signs with pictures of the missing children. They lit candles and said prayers. But they also lined up at recruitment centers. Mothers and fathers. Brothers and sisters. Young people who had never held a weapon in their lives. They all wanted to help. They all wanted to fight. In her small apartment in Chicago, a woman named Maria Santos watched the news with tears running down her face. Her niece, a 7-year-old girl named Sophie, had been on Meridian Colony. Sophie had been visiting her grandfather for the summer. Now she was gone, taken by monsters to a place far away. Maria stood up. She wiped her eyes. She put on her coat and walked to the nearest recruitment center. I want to join, she told the officer at the desk. Why? He asked. Maria showed him a picture of Sophie, a little girl with brown hair and a big smile, holding a stuffed rabbit. Because my niece is out there somewhere, and I am going to bring her home. The officer nodded and handed her a form. She was not the first person to say those words today. She would not be the last. Across the galaxy, humanity was waking up. The sleeping giant was opening its eyes. And it was angry. The Kethari had made a terrible mistake. They had crossed the red line. And what came next would be unstoppable. They crossed humanity's red line, and what came next was Unstoppable Part 2. The news spread across every human world like fire. On Earth, on Mars, on the distant colonies at the edge of known space, people stopped what they were doing and watched their screens. They saw the footage of children being taken. They heard the Kethari overseer mocking them. And something changed inside every human who watched. For 200 years, humanity had chosen peace. After the terrible resource wars of 2089, when billions had died and Earth itself had nearly been destroyed, humans had made a promise to themselves. No more war. No more weapons of mass destruction. No more killing. They would be builders, not destroyers. They would be friends to all species in the galaxy. But now, that promise was being tested. In the Great Hall of the Coalition Senate on Earth, representatives from every human colony gathered. The hall was huge, with seats for over 1,000 people. Today, every seat was filled. The air was thick with anger and fear and something else. Something dangerous. Senator Daniel Price of the Mars Collective stood up to speak. He was a tall man with dark skin and gray hair. His hands were shaking as he held his notes. 200 years ago, he began, our ancestors made a choice. They looked at the destruction they had caused, and they said, never again. They melted down their weapons. They turned their warships into cargo haulers. They taught their children that violence was always wrong. He paused and looked around the room. I believed in that choice. I still believe in it. Peace is always better than war. But there is something I believe in more. I believe that children are innocent. I believe that children deserve to be protected. And I believe that anyone who hurts children must face the consequences. His voice grew stronger. The Kethari took 412 of our children. They took them from their beds. They ripped them from their parents' arms. They loaded them onto ships like cargo and carried them away. And they did this because they thought we were too weak to stop. Them. He slammed his hand on the table. They were wrong. The vote that followed was something that had never happened before in the history of the coalition. Every single senator voted yes. Not one person said no. For the first time in 200 years, humanity authorized total war. In the days that followed, things began to change. In orbital shipyards above Earth and Mars and a dozen other worlds, workers arrived to find new ores waiting for them. The shipyards had been building cargo ships and passenger vessels for generations. Now, they would build something else. Chief Engineer Rosa Martinez stood in the main yard above Earth, looking at the new designs on her tablet. She was a short woman with strong arms and oil stains on her clothes. She had built ships her whole life, but she had never seen anything like these plans. These are weapons, she said to her supervisor. Real weapons. The kind we stopped making a long time ago. Her supervisor, a tired old man named Frank Lopez, nodded slowly. They took our kids, Rosa. What did they expect us to do? Rosa looked at the plans again. The ships were beautiful in a terrible way. Fast and deadly, with weapons that could tear through any armor. She felt a chill run down her spine. I will build them, she said. I will build them faster than anyone has ever built anything. Across human space, similar scenes were happening. In secret vaults that had been sealed for over a century, engineers opened doors that had not moved in generations. They found weapons that their great-grandparents had designed. Weapons so powerful that they had been considered too terrible to ever use. Dr. Nina Ortiz was the chief scientist at the Titan Research Station, a cold facility on one of the moons of Saturn. She had spent her career studying energy systems and helping colonies build better power plants. But her grandmother had been a weapons designer during the resource wars, and she had left Nina something in her will. A key. Nina used that key to open a vault deep beneath the station. Inside, she found row after row of sealed containers. Each container held plans for weapons that could destroy fleets, crack planets, and burn stars. Her grandmother had sealed them away, hoping they would never be needed again. I am sorry, Grandma, Nina whispered as she began scanning the files. But they took our children. Working beside her was her young assistant, Charlie Webb. He was only 23 years old, fresh out of the academy. His eyes were wide as he looked at the weapon designs. These are incredible, he said, and terrifying. We really built these things? We built them, Nina said. And then we promised never to use them again. But promises have limits. Some things are more important than promises. While the scientists and engineers worked on weapons, something else was happening across human space. People were volunteering. Millions of them. Old soldiers who had sworn never to fight again. Young people who had never held a gun. Parents who had lost children. Children who had lost siblings. They all came forward, Ready to do whatever was needed. Maria Santos arrived at the training camp on Mars 3 weeks after she signed up. She was 34 years old and had never been a soldier. She was a teacher. She taught history to children at a school in Chicago. But now she was learning how to shoot a gun and wear battle armor. The training was hard. Maria's body hurt every day. Her muscles screamed and her bones ached. But every night, before she went to sleep, she looked at the picture of Sophie on her tablet. A little girl with brown hair and a bright smile. Her niece. Her family. "I am coming for you," Maria whispered to the picture every night. "Hold on. I am coming." In the bunk next to hers was a woman named Patricia Reyes. Patricia was 45 years old and had been a pilot for cargo ships. Her son, a 10-year-old boy named Marco, had been taken from Meridian. "Why did you join?" Maria asked her one night. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke. "When Marco was born, I held him in my arms and I made him a promise. I told him I would always protect him. I would always keep him safe. I would never let anything bad happen to him." Her voice broke. "I broke that promise. He was with his father on Meridian, visiting for the summer. I was supposed to join them the next week. But then the Cathari came." She wiped her eyes. "I am going to get him back. And I am going to make sure no one ever takes him from me again." Stories like this were happening everywhere. Humanity had been peaceful for 2 centuries. But that peace had not made them weak. It had just put their strength to sleep. Now, that strength was waking up. And it was angry. 6 months after the raid on Meridian, the fleet was ready. Admiral Grace Harper stood on the bridge of her new flagship, the UEC Thunder. It was 3 times the size of the Vigilant and carried weapons that could destroy a moon. Around it, 500 other ships waited in formation. The largest human war fleet ever assembled. Grace looked out at her fleet and felt something she had not expected to feel: pride. These ships had been built by workers who had never made weapons before. They were crewed by soldiers who had never wanted to fight. But they had all come together for one reason. "Admiral," said Commander Lucy Brennan, "the fleet is ready. All ships report green." Grace nodded. She opened a channel to every ship in the fleet. "This is Admiral Harper. 200 years ago, our ancestors chose peace. They were not wrong to do so. Peace is precious. Life is precious. But some things are more precious than peace and even life itself. Our children are out there, waiting for us to come. They are scared and alone, but they have not lost hope, because they know something that the Cathari do not know." She paused. "They know that humanity will never abandon them. They know that we will cross any distance, fight any enemy, and pay any price to bring them home. Today, we prove them right. Today, we show the galaxy what happens when you cross humanity's red line." She took a deep breath. "All ships, engage jump drives. We are going to war." The fleet vanished into the stars, leaving nothing behind but the echo of 500 engines and a promise written in fire. The children would come home. Whatever it takes. They crossed humanity's red line, and what came next was Unstoppable Part 3. The Cathari Dominion was old. It had existed for 10,000 years. In that time, the Cathari had conquered 17 different species. They had crushed rebellions, destroyed fleets, and built an empire that stretched across 200 star systems. They believed they were the strongest species in the galaxy. Overlord Vexter sat on his throne in the Great Palace on Kethno Prime. He was the leader of the Dominion, the most powerful Cathari alive. His shell was covered with golden markings that showed his rank. His many eyes watched the reports coming in from across his empire. "The humans are mobilizing," said his advisor, a smaller Cathari named Sektar. "Our spies report that they have built hundreds of warships. They are coming for their young. Vexter made a clicking sound that was the Cathari way of laughing. "Let them come," he said. "The humans are soft. They have not fought a real war in 200 of their years. They speak of peace and kindness and rights. They have forgotten how to be warriors. Our fleet will destroy them easily." Sektar shifted nervously on his many legs. "Overlord, some of our advisors are worried. The humans expanded very quickly across the stars. They must have some strength that we do not see." "They have no strength," Vexter said. "They are prey animals pretending to be predators. When they see our warships, they will run. And if they do not run, they will die. Either way, we will keep their offspring. The young humans will make excellent servants." He waved one of his clawed hands. "Send word to our border fleets. Tell them to prepare for the humans. This will be a short war." But Vexter was wrong. He was very, very wrong. The first battle happened in the Verkis system, a border world that marked the edge of Cathari space. Admiral Grace Harper led a task force of 30 human ships against a defending fleet of 60. Cathari warships. Commander Zethkor was in charge of the Cathari defense. He had won 12 battles against other species. He had never lost. When his sensors showed only 30 human ships approaching, he felt almost disappointed. "Pathetic," he said to his crew. "They send 30 ships against 60. Do they not know how to count?" His tactical officer clicked in agreement. "Perhaps they wish to surrender, Commander. Perhaps. But we will not accept their surrender. We will destroy them all. It will send a message to the rest of their species." The two fleets moved toward each other. The Cathari ships were large and heavily armored, covered with weapons that had crushed many enemies. They moved in a formation that had worked for centuries. The human ships were different. They were smaller and faster, painted dark gray like shadows. They moved in patterns that the Cathari had never seen before, spreading out and circling around. "They fight strangely," the tactical officer said. "Their formation makes no sense." Zethkar did not care. "It does not matter how they fly. Fire all weapons." The Cathari ships opened fire. Bright beams of energy shot across space toward the human fleet. But something strange happened. The human ships were not where the beams were aimed. They had moved, sliding through space like ghosts. "They are fast," the tactical officer said, his voice confused. "Very fast." "Keep firing," Zethkar ordered. "They cannot dodge forever." But before the Cathari could fire again, the human ships attacked. Admiral Harper watched from the Bridge of the Thunder as her fleet unleashed its weapons. The new Helios-class cannons fired concentrated solar plasma, energy taken from the sun itself and compressed into beams of pure destruction. They hit the first Cathari ship and cut through its armor like a hot knife through butter. The ship exploded in a ball of fire. "First target destroyed," reported Lieutenant Kevin Park, moving to second target. The battle that followed was not really a battle. It was a lesson. Human weapons, designed during the darkest period of human history and improved by 200 years of hidden research, were unlike anything the Cathari had ever seen. The plasma beams melted armor from miles away. Electronic warfare systems, built by the best hackers humanity had ever produced, invaded Cathari computers and turned their own ships against each other. Missile swarms that could think for themselves hunted down every enemy vessel. Commander Zethkor watched in horror as his fleet was destroyed around him. Ship after ship exploded or went dark. His communications were jammed. His weapons would not fire. His shields flickered and died. "This is impossible," he said. "The humans cannot have weapons like this. They are peaceful. They are weak." His ship shook as a plasma beam cut through the hull. Alarms screamed. Fire burst from broken pipes. Zethkar had just enough time to realize how wrong he had been before his ship exploded. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it was over, all 60 Cathari ships were destroyed. The human fleet had not lost a single vessel. On the bridge of the Thunder, Commander Lucy Brennan looked at her tactical display. "Admiral, all enemy ships destroyed. Our fleet is at 100% strength." Grace nodded slowly. She felt no joy at the victory. This was not about winning battles. This was about saving children. "Send a message to the Cathari command frequency," she said. "One word only, children." The message was received on Kethaner Prime within hours. Overlord Vexter read it in silence. For the first time in his long life, he felt something cold in his chest. Something that might have been fear. How did this happen? He demanded. Our fleet was twice their size. His advisors had no answers. They clicked nervously and avoided his eyes. News of the defeat spread across the Dominion. Other Cathari commanders watched the battle recordings and felt their confidence crumble. The humans had destroyed 60 warships in 11 minutes. They had done it without losing a single ship. They had done it easily, but the military defeat was only the beginning. While Admiral Harper pressed forward with her fleet, a different kind of war was being fought in the shadows. Human hackers were some of the best in the galaxy. They had spent 200 years improving their skills, finding ways into any computer system ever built. Now, they turned those skills against the Cathari. Within days, human hackers had broken into the most secure Cathari networks. They found records of every crime the Dominion had committed, every species they had enslaved, every world they had destroyed. And they found footage of what was happening to the children of Meridian. The children were being held in a facility on Kethaner Prime. They were being trained to be servants. They were being taught that their parents had abandoned them. They were being told that humans were weak and worthless. Some of them were being hurt. The hackers released all of this information to every species in the galaxy. They sent it to news networks, to governments, to ordinary people on 1,000 worlds. They made sure everyone knew exactly what the Cathari had done. The response was immediate. 3 species that had been allies of the Dominion announced that they were withdrawing from all agreements. They wanted nothing to do with a species that would steal children. 2 other species began secret talks with Earth Command. They had no love for the Cathari and saw a chance to break free from Dominion control. Even within the Dominion itself, some Cathari began to question their leaders. The old ways had always worked before, but maybe taking human children had been a mistake. Maybe they had awakened something they could not stop. On the Thunder, Admiral Harper received reports of the galaxy's reaction. She read them in her private quarters, alone with her thoughts. "Good," she said quietly. "Let them see what the Cathari really are. Let them see what happens to those who harm our children." She pulled up a map showing the location of the human children. They were deep in Cathari space, on the homeworld itself. Getting to them would not be easy. The Dominion would throw everything they had at the human fleet. But Grace had seen the faces of the children in the footage. She had seen their fear and their tears. She had made them a silent promise. "We are coming," she whispered to the map. "Hold on just a little longer. We are coming." Outside her window, the stars stretched into infinity. Somewhere among them, 412 children were waiting to be rescued. And nothing in the galaxy was going to stop humanity from bringing them home. They crossed humanity's red line, and what came next was Unstoppable Part 4. The war had been going on for 6 months. Human forces had pushed deep into Cathari territory. They had won battle after battle, destroying enemy fleets and freeing slave worlds. But the children had not been found. Intelligence reported that they were being held on Kethaner Prime itself, the heavily protected homeworld of the Dominion. Captain Rick Dawson sat in the briefing room of the UEC Shadow, a special operations vessel designed for missions that no one else could complete. He was 38 years old with short brown hair and eyes that had seen too much. He had been a soldier for 15 years, but he had never faced a mission like this one. "The facility is called the Vault," said the intelligence officer, projecting a hologram into the center of the room. "It is located beneath the capital city on Kethna Prime, 12 levels underground, surrounded by the most advanced security the Cathari have ever built." Rick studied the hologram. It showed a massive underground structure, protected by walls of reinforced metal and energy shields. Armed guards patrolled every corridor. Automated weapons watched every entrance. "The children are being held on level 9, the officer continued. "All 412 of them. They are alive, but the Cathari are using them as hostages. They believe we will not attack if we might hurt the children." Rick looked at the faces around the table. He had handpicked every member of his team. They were the best soldiers humanity had. Sergeant Amy Lynn was a former Olympic athlete who could move through any space without making a sound. Technical Sergeant George Palmer was a hacking genius who could break into any computer system ever built. Medic Paula Reeves was close to retirement age but had more experience than anyone else on the team. And there were 8 others, each an expert in their field. "How do we get in?" Rick asked. The intelligence officer changed the hologram to show the planet's defenses. "The main fleet will create a distraction. They will attack the orbital stations and draw the Cathari defense forces away from the planet. During the confusion, your ship will drop into the atmosphere using stealth technology. You will land here, 5 miles from the facility." He pointed to a dark area on the map. "From there, you will make your way underground using maintenance tunnels. These tunnels are not well guarded because the Cathari do not believe anyone knows about them. But our hackers found the blueprints. And once we are inside?" Amy asked. "You fight your way to level 9. You secure the children. You call for extraction. Transport shuttles will be waiting in orbit, ready to come down the moment you give the signal." George Palmer leaned back in his chair. "What about the guards? How many are we looking at?" "Several hundred in the facility itself. Thousands more in the city above. If they realize what is happening, they will send reinforcements. You will be outnumbered and outgunned." Rick nodded slowly. He had expected as much. "Rules of engagement?" Paula asked quietly. Rick met her eyes. "Get the children out. Whatever it takes." The mission launched 3 days later. Admiral Harper's fleet attacked the Cathari orbital defenses with everything they had. Plasma beams lit up the darkness of space. Explosions bloomed like flowers of fire. The Cathari scrambled to respond, pulling ships from all over the system to defend their homeworld. No one noticed the small, dark ship that slipped through the chaos and dove into the planet's atmosphere. The Shadow landed in a rocky valley far from the city. Rick and his team moved out in silence, their black armor making them nearly invisible in the darkness. They found the maintenance tunnel entrance exactly where intelligence said it would be. "George, get us in," Rick whispered. George Palmer connected his equipment to the tunnel's electronic lock. His fingers danced over his tablet, lines of code scrolling across the screen. "The Cathari use a 12-layer encryption system," he said quietly. "Most hackers would need a week to break it. Give me 40 seconds. 37 seconds later, the tunnel door slid open. The team moved underground like shadows. They passed through narrow corridors and climbed down rusted ladders. They avoided patrols and disabled security cameras. Every step brought them closer to the children. On level 7, they ran into their first real trouble. "Patrol ahead," Amy whispered, holding up her hand. 8 guards, heading this way. Rick considered their options. They could try to go around, but it would cost them precious time. The distraction above would not last forever. "Take them down," he ordered. Quietly. The team moved with precision that came from years of training. Amy and two others slipped behind the patrol. Rick and the rest approached from the front. When the Kethari guards realized they were not alone, it was already too late. The fight was over in seconds. 8 Kethari bodies lay on the floor. Not one of them had been able to call for help. "Move," Rick said. "We are running out of time." Level 9 was different from the others. The corridors were wider and the lights were brighter. There were more guards, and they were better armed. But Rick's team had come too far to stop now. They reached the holding area after fighting through 3 more patrols. The door was massive, made of metal so thick that explosives would not work. But George Palmer smiled as he approached the control panel. "This is their best security?" he said. "I have seen harder locks on toy boxes." He worked his magic, and the door slid open. Inside, Rick saw something that made his heart stop. 412 children sat in rows of bunk beds. They were thin and pale, with dark circles under their eyes. Some of the youngest ones were crying quietly. Others stared at nothing, their faces empty of hope. Then a little girl near the front looked up and saw the human soldiers. Her eyes went wide. "Are you real?" she whispered. "Are you really here?" Paula Reeves knelt down in front of her. The medic's eyes were wet with tears, but her voice was steady. "Yes, sweetheart. We are real. We are here to take you home." The little girl's name was Sophie Miller. She was 7 years old and had brown hair and a face that had almost forgotten how to smile. But when she heard Paula's words, something changed in her eyes. Hope. "My Aunt Maria," Sophie said. "She told me she would come. She promised." "Then she must be a woman of her word," Paula said. "Because we are here." The extraction began immediately. Rick organized the children into groups, with soldiers protecting each one. They moved back through the tunnels, retracing their steps toward the surface. But the Kethari had finally realized what was happening. Alarms began to sound. Reinforcements poured into the facility. "They are coming from above and below," Amy reported. "We are going to be surrounded." Rick made a quick decision. "George, can you collapse this tunnel behind us?" George looked at the power junction on the wall. "I can overload it. The explosion will bring down the whole corridor. But someone has to stay behind to trigger it manually." Rick opened his mouth to volunteer, but George shook his head. "No, Captain. You have to lead them out." "I will do this. George, I am not asking for permission." George was already connecting his equipment to the junction. "My wife and I never had children, but I have been watching these kids for the past hour. Scared and alone, waiting for someone to save them. I can give them a chance to get out. That is enough for me." Rick wanted to argue. He wanted to find another way. But there was no time. The sound of Kethari soldiers was getting closer. "You are a hero, George Palmer." George smiled. "Just tell my wife I love her." The team moved out, pushing as fast as they could with 400 children in tow. Behind them, they heard the sound of gunfire as George held the line. Then there was a massive explosion, and the tunnel collapsed. George Palmer was gone, but his sacrifice had worked. The path behind them was blocked. The Kethari could not follow. They reached the surface just as the transport shuttles descended from orbit. The children were loaded quickly, soldiers counting heads and checking names. Every single child was accounted for. 412. Rick was the last one to board. As the shuttle lifted off, he looked back at the burning city below. Somewhere down there, George Palmer had given his life so that children could go home. "The children are secure," Rick reported to Admiral Harper. "We are heading to orbit." On the bridge of the Thunder, Grace Harper closed her eyes and let out a breath she had been holding for months. "Well done, Captain," she said. "Well done." Then she opened her eyes and looked at the tactical display. The Cathari homeworld lay before her, its defenses crumbling under the human assault. "Target their military installations," she ordered. "Level every base, every shipyard, every weapons factory. Leave nothing standing, but do not harm their civilians. We are not them." The bombardment began. The children watched from the windows of their shuttles as fire rained down on the world that had held them prisoner. Some of them cried. Others cheered. Little Sophie Miller just held her stuffed rabbit and whispered to herself, "I knew they would come. I knew it." In orbit, the human fleet watched the planet burn. They had done terrible things today. They had killed many Cathari. They had destroyed an ancient civilization's military power, but they had also saved 412 children, and that made it worth everything. They crossed humanity's red line, and what came next was Unstoppable Part 5. The war ended 3 months after the children were rescued. It ended not with a great battle, but with a single message from the Cathari Dominion to Earth Command. "We surrender. Unconditionally." For 10,000 years, the Cathari had never lost a war. They had crushed every enemy they had ever faced. They had believed themselves to be the masters of the galaxy. But humanity had broken them in less than a year. Overlord Vexter tried to flee when the human fleet appeared over his palace. He had a private ship hidden beneath the building, loaded with treasure and supplies. He thought he could escape, hide on some distant world, and rebuild his power. He was wrong. Human soldiers captured him before he could reach his ship. They put him in chains and brought him before the cameras so the whole galaxy could see. The most powerful Cathari in history, brought low by a species he had called weak. "You made a mistake," one of the human soldiers told him. "You touched our children." The trial lasted 6 months. Representatives from every species in the galaxy came to watch. They heard testimony from the children who had been kidnapped. They saw footage of what had been done to them. They listened as survivors described their fear and pain. When the verdict came, no one was surprised. Vexter was found guilty of crimes against humanity. He would spend the rest of his life in prison, alone with his memories of the empire he had lost. But the trial was only part of what happened after the war. Something bigger was changing across the galaxy. Species that had feared the Cathari for thousands of years were suddenly free. Slave worlds declared their independence. Trade routes that had been controlled by the Dominion opened to everyone and everywhere. Beings of all kinds looked at humanity with new eyes. Ambassador Helen Grant stood before the Galactic Council to address the assembled representatives. The council chamber was vast, with seats for over 50 different species. Helen was a small woman with silver hair and calm blue eyes. She had spent her whole life working for peace, but she had also supported the war when the children were taken. Now, she had to explain what humanity had done and why. "Thank you for allowing me to speak," she began. "I know that many of you have questions about what happened between humanity and the Cathari Dominion. I will try to answer them as honestly as I can." She paused and looked around the chamber. For 200 years, humanity chose peace. We put away our weapons. We reached out to other species with friendship and respect. We built trade networks and shared our technology and medicine. We asked nothing in return except to be left alone. Her voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. Some of you saw this as weakness. You thought that because we did not fight, we could not fight. The Cathari certainly believed this. They looked at our peaceful ways and saw prey. They looked at our children and saw servants to be taken. She let the silence stretch for a moment. They were wrong. Helen stepped forward, her eyes moving across the faces of dozens of alien species. "Let me be very clear about something. Humanity does not want war. We never have. We believe that life is precious, that every being has value, that the galaxy is big enough for all of us to live together in peace. These beliefs are not a mask we wear. They are who we truly are, Her voice grew harder. But there are lines that cannot be crossed. Boundaries that, when broken, wake something ancient inside us. We are not warriors by nature. We are parents. We are teachers. We are builders and dreamers. We create and nurture and protect. And we protect what we love with a strength that you cannot imagine. She lifted her hand and pointed at the empty seat where the Cathari representative had once sat. The Dominion took our children. They ripped them from their homes and carried them across the stars. They did this because they thought we would be too afraid to stop them. They learned the truth the hard way. Helen lowered her hand and her voice softened. We did not enjoy what we did. Every life lost in this war was a tragedy, even Cathari lives. We take no pleasure in destruction, but we will never, ever abandon our young. Not for peace. Not for trade. Not for anything. She looked directly at the camera that was broadcasting her words across the galaxy. This is not a threat. It is a promise. Humanity wants to be your friend. We want to trade with you, learn from you, grow alongside you. We want peace and cooperation and a bright future for all species. Her eyes hardened. But our children are not bargaining chips. Our families are not resources to be harvested. Cross that line, and you will learn what we really are. You will learn that the kindness we show is a choice, not a weakness. And you will learn that there is nothing in this galaxy more dangerous than a parent protecting their child. She stepped back from the podium. That is all I have to say. Thank you for listening. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, the representatives began to respond. Some nodded in understanding. Others looked frightened. A few seemed angry. But they all understood the message. Humanity was not to be tested. In the years that followed, things returned to normal. Trade routes reopened. Diplomatic relationships were rebuilt. The scars of war began to heal. But something had changed. When human ships passed through foreign space, other species gave them respect. Not out of fear, exactly, but out of understanding. They knew what humanity was capable of. And they knew what lines not to cross. On Earth, in a quiet neighborhood in Chicago, Maria Santa stood in her kitchen making breakfast. It had been 2 years since the war ended. 2 years since she had fought her way across the galaxy to bring her niece home. She still had the scars on her body from the battle she had fought. But she would not trade them for anything. "Aunt Maria," a young voice called from the backyard. "Come see what I found." Maria smiled and walked to the window. Outside, Sophie Miller was playing in the grass. She was 9 years old now, healthy and happy. Her brown hair had grown long, and her face had learned how to smile again. She was holding something in her hands. Cupped carefully, Maria went outside and knelt down next to her niece. "What did you find, sweetheart?" Sophie opened her hands to reveal a butterfly. It was small and blue, with wings that shimmered in the sunlight. "Is it not beautiful?" Sophie asked. "I want to keep it." Maria looked at the butterfly, then at her niece. She remembered the scared little girl she had found in the vault, thin and pale and afraid. She remembered carrying Sophie to the transport shuttle, promising her that everything would be okay. She remembered the long journey home, holding Sophie while she slept. "It is very beautiful," Maria said. "But butterflies are not meant to be kept. They need to fly free. That is what makes them special." Sophie thought about this for a moment. Then she nodded and opened her hands wider. The butterfly sat still for a second, then spread its wings and flew away. Sophie watched it go with a smile on her face. "Aunt Maria?" "Yes?" "I am glad you came for me." Maria pulled her niece into a hug. Tears ran down her face, but they were good tears. Happy tears. "I will always come for you," she said. Always. They stayed like that for a long time, aunt and niece, holding each other in the warm morning sun. Around them, the world went on. Birds sang. Cars drove past. Neighbors walked their dogs. Normal things. Peaceful things. That peace had been bought with blood and fire. It had been bought with the courage of soldiers like George Palmer, who had given his life so that children could go home. It had been bought with the determination of ordinary people like Maria, who had transformed themselves into warriors when their loved ones were threatened, and it would be protected forever, because humanity had learned something about itself during the war. They had learned that their kindness was a choice, not a weakness. They had learned that their love for their children was stronger than any weapon. And they had learned that when the red line was crossed, they were capable of things that shocked even themselves. The galaxy knew it too. The story of the human war against the Cathari spread from world to world, species to species. It became a legend, a warning, a reminder. Do not touch their children. Do not test their love. Because when humanity fights for its young, nothing can stop them. Nothing. In her backyard in Chicago, Sophie Miller chased butterflies and laughed in the sunshine. She did not remember much about the vault anymore. The nightmares had stopped. The fear had faded. She was just a little girl living a normal life, dreaming normal dreams. That was enough. That was everything. And somewhere among the stars, in the quiet spaces between worlds, the legend of humanity continued to grow. A species of peace that could wage terrible war. A people of kindness that could unleash unstoppable fury. A civilization that loved its children so much that they would burn the galaxy to protect them. They crossed humanity's red line, and what came next was unstoppable. The end.